Hello, Buckley's Bookworms. Boy, am I happy to see you because we are starting a brand new, really fantastic book. It's called The Chocolate Touch by Patrick Skene Catling. Maybe it's Catling. I think it's Catling. At any rate, this is a timeless classic. I read it when I was a little one. Not that you're little, but you know what I mean. Back when I was a little kid, not the old lady that I am now. Anyway, I hope you really enjoy this as much as I do. As we read this book, I really want you to focus on character traits. Character traits are those words we use to describe someone's personality, what's on the inside of somebody. Now that's different than physical traits. Physical traits would describe somebody's outside, like I have blonde hair, I have black glasses, I have round cheeks, I have white teeth. Those are all physical characteristics, but character traits are used to describe my personality, like energetic and funny and courageous. Those are called character traits. So I just want you to pay attention to the characters, the people in the story, and I want you to determine what kind of people are they? What words could we use to describe their personalities? Now, that's sometimes trickier than it sounds. We have to pay really close attention to what a character thinks, what they say. We have to pay attention to their actions. And we have to pay attention to the other clues that the author gives us to describe a character. But guess what? I know you can do it. You guys are really good text detectives. All right, but you're not here to talk about character traits right now. You're here to talk about chocolate. So let's go ahead and turn to chapter 1. You'll find it on page 9. All right, chapter 1. Most of the time, John Midas was a very nice boy. Every now and then, of course, he broke a rule, such as the rule against pretending to be a tiger when his sister Mary was supposed to be getting to sleep. Generally speaking, however, he behaved very well. He should have behaved better. He lived in a comfortable house surrounded by a green lawn and wide-spreading shade trees that were suitable for climbing. His mother was gentle as well as practical. His father, when he didn't have to hurry to town, spent hours telling John interesting things about baseball, beetles, birds' nests, boats, brigands. Do you know what those are? Those are like a band of thieves that roam through the forest or the mountains, and they jump out and they rob people as they're going through the forest and the mountains. Yikes. And, oh yeah, butterflies. John went to school and liked it. His teacher, Mrs. Plimsoll, was fairly easy to get along with, as long as he did careful work. He had received a new, shiny golden trumpet and music lessons and he got music lessons. I read that sentence wrong. That happens sometimes when we're reading. I'm going to go back to the beginning of the sentence so I can read it more fluently. He had received a new shiny golden trumpet and music lessons as a going to school present. Mrs. Quaver, the music teacher, Quaver? That's wild. Mrs. Quaver, the music teacher, had soon agreed to let him play small parts, a few notes at a time, with the school orchestra. Finally, there was Susan Buttercup, who was in his class. Susan had soft yellow curls, round pink cheeks, blue eyes, and one of the best collections of marbles in the neighborhood. Now, they just used some words to describe Susan Buttercup. They said she had the author said she had soft yellow curls, round pink cheeks, blue eyes. Are those physical traits, physical characteristics, or are they character traits? Answer now. All right. John should have been completely well behaved, but he wasn't. He had one bad fault. He was a pig about candy. Boiled candy, cotton candy, licorice of all sorts, old-fashioned toffee, candied orange and lemon slices, Cracker Jack, jelly beans, fudge, black currant lozenges for ticklish throats, nougats, maroons glacés, acid drops, peppermint sticks, lollipops, marshmallows, and above all, chocolates. He devoured them all. While other boys and girls spent their money on model airplanes, magazines, skipping ropes, and pet lizards, John studied candy counters. All his money went on candy, top of page 14, and all of his candy went to himself. He never shared it. John Midas was candy mad. At lunch one Saturday, Mrs. Midas noticed a couple of little red spots on the end of John's nose. "Look," she said to Mr. Midas, "John has spots." Mr. Midas leaned forward to see them. He gravely shook his head and clicked his tongue. John tried to see too, but it is very difficult to see the end of your own nose without a mirror unless you happen to be an elephant with a long nose that you can bend double. When John tried to look at the end of his nose, first with one eye, and then with another eye, and then with both eyes together, all that he could see was a pink blur. Besides, trying to look at something so close made his eyes ache. "I can't see any spots, Mother," John said. "Well, I can," Mr. Midas said. "Just because you don't see a thing doesn't always mean it isn't there. Try feeling the end of your nose with your finger." John rubbed his finger over the tip of his nose. It felt a bit rough. "It may be the measles," Mrs. Midas said anxiously. She placed her hand on John's forehead to feel whether he was warmer than usual. "I don't think he has a temperature," she decided. "I suspect John has been eating too much candy again," Mr. Midas said. "Have you been eating candy this morning, John?" "Some," John admitted. "What?" Mr. Midas asked. "Well," John replied, "well, I had a few cream delights. Susan gave them to me." "Anything else?" Mr. Midas asked. "Well, a little toffee crunch," John said. "And what else?" Mr. Midas asked, beginning to look cross. Cross is a word that means irritated or slightly angry. John's ears grew red. Oh, he knew he wasn't supposed to eat candy before meals. Hardly anything else," he said. "John," Mr. Midas said, and his son recognized that tone. It meant John had to tell everything. It turned out that John had been around to see most of his friends and had managed to get candy out of nearly all of them. The list he recited was a long one. "Well, no wonder you have spots," Mr. Midas commented at last. "I think we better take John to see Dr. Cranium," he said to Mrs. Midas. Hey, fun fact, cranium is another word for your skull. Dr. Cranium. What a funny name. I wonder if that means that he's a head doctor. Dr. Cranium was a tall, thin man with a bald head and a gray mustache. He looked through his glasses at John and said, Well, he eats lots of candy, Mr. Midas said. Well, he hasn't been eating his meals properly, Mrs. Midas said. It's just what I thought, Dr. Cranium said. I can tell by looking at him that he eats much too much candy. The doctor shone a little electric light into John's right ear. Then he shone it into John's left ear. And then he shone it into John's nose. He told John to open wide and say, ah. He shone the light into John's mouth. Much too much candy. Gracious me. Well, he seems to be full of candy. He told John to sit down and relax. Then he picked up a small rubber-headed hammer and gave John a light tap on his right knee, just below the joint. John's foot gave a weak kick. John giggled. "It's nothing to laugh about," Mr. Midas said. "No, John," the doctor reproved him. "A healthy little boy who didn't eat too much candy would kick much harder than that." "Oh, I'm sorry," John said politely. "But I can," top of page 18, "but I can kick harder if you want me to." He gave a sudden high kick, which knocked the hammer out of Dr. Cranium's hand. It landed on its rubber head and bounced across the room. "John!" exclaimed Mrs. Midas. I am so sorry, Dr. Cranium." "John, you tell the doctor you're sorry for kicking his hammer." "I'm sorry I kicked your hammer," John said. "I would recommend less candy," Dr. Cranium told Mr. and Mrs. Midas. An upset stomach can lead to all sorts of complications." On the way home, Mrs. Midas tried to explain to John what she thought the doctor meant by complications. "You see," she said, "if you put too much of one kind of food in your stomach and not enough of other kinds, it is bad for your whole body, because different parts of your body need different kinds of food. Do you understand?" "I think so," John said. "You've been eating so much sweet stuff," Mr. Midas added, "that there isn't room for eggs and meat and milk and bread and spinach and apples and fish and bananas and all the other things you're supposed to have to make you grow big and strong." "I like bananas," John said. "Oh, especially thin slices covered in chocolate. They're called banana surprises." Mr. Midas looked at Mrs. Midas, and Mrs. Midas looked at Mr. Midas. They both just shrugged their shoulders. Sometimes it was hard to make John understand things. At home, while Mrs. Midas was busy in the kitchen, Mr. Midas continued to reason with John. "You mean you'd rather eat candy than anything else, and chocolate rather than any other kind of candy?" Mr. Midas asked. "Oh, yes, yes," John assured him. "Oh, yes." "Don't you think there's such a thing as enough?" Mr. Midas persisted. "Don't you think that things are best in their places? I mean, don't you think there's a time for spaghetti and a time for roast beef and even a time for pickled herring and garlic toast, as well as a time for chocolate? Or would you rather I just have chocolate all the time?" "Chocolate all the time," John replied emphatically. "Chocolate's best, that's all. Other things are just food, but chocolate's chocolate. Chocolate." "I think I understand," Mr. Midas broke in sharply. "Very well." He took a deep breath and went on. "John," he said, "if you can't understand what sort of diet is really best for you, can't you at least get it into your head that you make your mother very unhappy when you eat so much candy that you can't eat anything else?" The conversation always seemed to get around to the effect of John's candy eating on John's mother. John couldn't see how it could possibly do her any harm if he ate candy. He sat silent for a moment. And then he said, "May I go out and play, please, Daddy?" Do you believe that John is listening to his parents' advice? Answer now. If you said no, I think you're on the right track. I don't get the sense that John is paying much attention. He continues to argue back, saying, "Oh, but chocolate, chocolate, chocolate." And then when Dad's trying to have a serious conversation with him, the only thing he can come up with to say is, "Can I go play outside?" I don't think John's listening. Let's tune in to chapter 2 and see if John comes to his senses. Happy reading!